Well, good afternoon. My name is Ashley Louisiana. I'm a program manager with RecyleSmart. Thank you so much for having us present here. We also have Judith Silver, our senior program manager, and Jennifer Fott, our contracts compliance specialist. And we have a 6-person staff, so you have half of us here. So we will present on different aspects of our agency. Next slide. So we are a local joint powers authority, a JPA, and we manage the solid waste and recycling programs in a portion of central Contra Costa County. So our service area includes Orinda, Lafayette, Moraga, Walnut Creek, Danville, and then some unincorporated areas including Alamo, Blackhawk, and Diablo. So again, it's a small portion of Contra Costa County. There is one other JPA, the West County JPA. They are called Recycle More, and they oversee about 6 different cities in the West County, Richmond area. And then the rest of the county is, they just do it individually at the city level. So the city of Concord, city of Martinez, city of Pleasant Hill, and the remaining cities throughout the county are all managing these programs and their garbage contracts at the city level. I think one of the benefits of JPAs is that you get to pool all these cities together. You're often going to get better costs, uniform programs over several different cities, less confusion. Historically, I've been with the agency about 13 years, and historically our rates have been a lot lower compared to the rest of the county, along with offering quite a bit more programs. So I think you get those benefits of pooling those cities together. Our rates have slightly increased in the last few years, I think because of the industry right now and the markets, we've seen a bit of an increase, but historically our rates have been quite a bit lower. Next slide, please. So we have a 12-member board of directors. There are 2 elected officials from each of our member cities. They meet monthly. It's an open public meeting. You can always see the agendas on our website 72 hours in advance. I think the biggest role of the board, they oversee all of our programs, but the 2 biggest things are franchise procurement and rate setting. So these franchise agreements, currently we have a franchise agreement with Republic Services for the collection of all materials, so landfill, recycling, and organics. And these are big contracts. You know, they're 10-year contracts, 15-year contracts, sometimes even 20-year contracts. They're multi-million-dollar, $500 million. They're often the biggest contract that your city or a JPA like ours will negotiate for your residents and businesses. So franchise procurement is a big role of the board, and then rate setting. So our board, they work with their city staff. It starts in about September every year, so it's about to start. They go through an open public meeting process. They set the rates through about January, February, and then the rates go into effect March 1st every year. Next slide, please. So this, I just wanted to show you is kind of a rate comparison across Contra Costa County. You can find your rate if you'd like, but I think the most important thing I wanted to share about rates is that it's not just the cost of service. It's not just Republic Services picking up your cart at the curb. A lot of factors go into rate setting, including franchise fees, the cost of services and programs. All of your recycling programs that are often mandated by the state are all usually covered in your garbage rates. So schools programs, organics, recycling, HHW, all of those are usually covered in your rates. Along with the cost of funding RecyleSmart, our programs, our services, road impact fees. So there's a lot, again, of different factors that go into rate setting each year. Next slide. I wanted to show this. So in 2015, one of the requirements of our franchise agreement with Republic was to get all new carts and bins. We've never, in the last 20, 30 years, we've never gotten all new carts and bins. So we had every color you could imagine out there. There was brown, yellow, white, I've seen pink. I mean, we've had every color. And so we really wanted uniform colors across our service area. It's really difficult to get clean material streams when you have different labeling, different color carts at school, at business. So one of the big requirements of our franchise was to get all new carts and bins for residents, schools, and businesses. And this is blue for recycling, green for organics, and black for landfill. And something exciting, Jen will talk about it a little more later on, but the state of California has passed SB 1383, and one very small portion of that piece of legislation is that all across the state of California, we will have the same color carts. I believe the year is 2030, so in the next 10 years, unless they push that out, every city across the state of California will have to have blue for recycling, green for organics, and either black or gray for trash or landfill. So that's something the industry has wanted for a long time, and I think it'll be a lot easier for people to go from city to city and from job to job and seeing all the same, color carts and labels. Next slide. One thing during COVID, I just wanted to send a reminder, unfortunately, we're using a lot of single-use items right now. We're using millions of masks across the world, single-use disposable gloves, wipes. We are kind of overloading our sewage system with wipes that was already happening, but now I would think it's even more. So just a reminder that these types of materials should always go in your black trash cart. They don't go down the drains. They don't go in recycling carts. They should always go in your trash bin. Next slide. Another requirement of our new franchise with Republic Services was to get a completely new fleet of compressed natural gas vehicles. It was pretty exciting in 2015. I think it was the first fleet they had said in the country that was all CNG trucks. There's a lot of environmental benefits, less emissions. It helps with greenhouse gas reduction. A big thing that our residents hopefully have noticed is that they should be a lot quieter compared to diesel and regular fuel. It's not a petroleum-based fuel. So that was a big requirement of our new franchise, was to get all new CNG trucks. Next slide. We offer a variety of programs to our residents to recycle and compost. We have food scrap recycling at home. You can get reduced cost compost bins to compost in your backyard. And there's been a real uptick. I've gotten so many questions over the last few months now that people are home and I think spending a lot more time in their backyards and really realizing the benefits of using your food scraps to make a organic fertilizer to use in your garden to then grow your own fruits and veggies. It's been a lot of questions lately, and I think people are understanding again the importance of that. We have business composting programs. All of our food waste from restaurants goes to East Bay Mud for anaerobic digestion. We have household hazardous waste programs like needle drop-off, medical sharps at all of our city halls and police departments, along with other HHW programs like oil at the curb, fluorescent lights at the curb, batteries at the curb. Next slide, please. I wanted to kind of highlight one of our programs that I think multiple cities throughout the state have been focusing on in the last couple of years, and that's battery recycling. So specifically, batteries are considered household hazardous waste. It's actually illegal to put those in your curbside carts, not even the trash, not recycling. You're not supposed to put them in any of your curbside carts. You're supposed to recycle them properly at a battery recycling location. And this picture is of a beautiful street in Lafayette. There's two things that can happen. Lithium ion batteries can combust very easily by the bustle and hustle of the trucks and the movement or over sorting processing lines, and they spark, they ignite fires. So there's been about 350 fires either in trucks or at processing facilities in 2019. There's been one death, injuries, but also what can happen when the protocol when it catches on fire in a truck, as you can see, is to dump all the materials onto the street, and then the fire department has to spray everything down with fire retardant. And so this was a complete load of recyclables. This was a recycling truck. And from one battery, that entire load of recyclables now has to go to the landfill. So not only, does it have environmental impacts, but they can create fires as well. Next slide, please. Another big program that's probably going to be a highlight over the next decade is organics recycling. So a lot of people think of the green cart, I think, as like green waste, your leaves and your grass clippings, but that's kind of changed over the last few years. Your green cart now includes all of your food scraps. Usually some cities might not be there yet, but again, with SB 1383 that Jen is going to touch on, it will be a requirement in the next couple of years. So we are hoping that residents are putting all their food scraps, all their paper materials, kitchen papers, food to go containers in their green cart along with their green waste. Grocery stores and restaurants are required to compost, and now will even be required to donate edible food to those in need to actually eat food. And then paper is a big part of organics too. There's a lot of food to go where, office paper, any paper items should really be recycled or composted. So it's a goal of the state over the next, decade to really reduce organics going to landfill. Next slide. Judith is actually going to take over now and talk to you a little bit about where everything is going.
Hi. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the markets. I think that's something that's always very important to keep in mind, that when we're recycling, we're really at this, we're just collecting the material, and then what happens to it once it is collected. In our service area, Republic collects everything, all the recyclables from residents and homes and businesses, and then it is collected and brought to the Pittsburgh facility, to the Mount Diablo Recycling Center, and there it is basically sorted back out. So after everything is put together, sort of to help make it more convenient, materials are then separated back out into individual commodity types. And most of that material ends up at the Oakland port for export. There's also, RecyleSmart has a really great reuse program that's a partnership between Mount Diablo Recycling and Republic Services. And all of those materials that are collected for reuse are obviously kept local, donated or sold. The organics fraction of our material stream, on the commercial side, there's a wonderful program called the Food Recycling Project, where just food scraps are collected from businesses like restaurants, hotels, grocery stores, and that material is brought to East Bay Mud in Oakland and is fed into their anaerobic digestion system. It's co-digested. The more traditional organics go to Forward Compost Facility in Monteca. And we're very, lucky to have in our county a landfill, Keller Canyon, where our landfill materials end up. So, that's just what happens in our service area. Just to say, if you live in West County, or you live in Concord, or wherever you live, that city and that hauler are negotiating for markets that will, help manage those material types. So I just wanted to sort of say that, again, I think what's important to remember is how local and how specific it can be. What materials are collected and where those materials go can be a very local thing, and that can be very frustrating for residents sometimes when they don't understand why something is taken in one community but not another. As Ashley was saying, sometimes some communities have yet to add food scraps to their residential organics material stream, but that will come based on 1383 and state law. Next slide. So I'm sure you guys have all come to hear about this issue of the national SOAR, that China is significantly less interested in our material than it used to be. And there's a number of reasons for that. But the reality is that is the case. One of the reasons is that China itself is sort of growing up as a country and has its own materials that it can manage internally. It's less reliant on imports from other countries. And also they are trying themselves to sort of improve their air quality and their quality of the facilities that are managing our materials. And so they've instituted some very, from our perspective, seemingly draconian, but very significant restrictions on quality. And we can only have 0.5% contamination of materials, which is a really very high bar and very, very hard to do. This is going to impact significantly plastics and also mixed paper. Next slide. I wanted to sort of point out on that point that, you can see how much of our materials as a country, I mean, California ports receive materials from, the middle of the country. It's brought by train and by truck to the ports. We're actually quite lucky to be living so close to a port because it does make the value, we don't spend as much on transporting the material to get it overseas, but so much of our material is sent to China, but significantly other countries as well in Asia and South America and in Europe. I mean, really, you have to remember that these materials are considered commodities, and they are, put back into the material stream to produce new materials. So just to think about how much of our material is sent overseas. We've had sort of a luxury over the years of being able to export materials, but that really does seem to be changing. And we need to consider how we can keep things more local. And there's a lot of things that we can do ourselves to hopefully, to use less material so that we're recycling less, so that less needs to go overseas. That's sort of the personal responsibility piece that we can take on. Next slide. I was I'm always shocked by how much more plastics are produced than used to be. This has just been an exponential growth in plastics production. Plastics is a complicated business. There are many types of plastics. If you, I'm sure, have seen the different numbering system on the different plastic containers. There are many different types of plastics. They really don't get along with each other. So, the different types of plastics have different infrastructure for their recyclability, and the sort of the ones and the twos, the plastic water bottles and the plastic jugs, like a Tide bottle or that type of a container, those have the best sort of infrastructure and have the highest recycling nation or kind of nationally or internationally. We're really facing a crisis here in terms of how much plastics, are in the oceans. And I mean, there's a statistic that by 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish. So, we really have to do our part to try and reduce how much plastic we're using so that we're sending less of it overseas. I wanted to point out one significant change. I don't know if you guys are aware of this thing called the Basel Convention, which basically is going to change the way, it basically is going to make mixed scrap plastics be considered something that a country has to basically agree to accept. So you can't just ship material to Indonesia or Malaysia starting in 2021 or any country like that. They have the right to say, we don't want this material. We don't think we can handle it. We consider this to be a waste and we don't want it in our country. And I think that, that sort of hopefully will level the playing field for, internationally, and allow smaller countries, more developing countries, to have some more control over materials that are coming into their country that they're feeling are, that first world countries are just sort of, dumping there. So again, we are in this, plastics are an outgrowth of convenience and also, you know, safety. I think in this time of COVID, we can all see why you wouldn't want to share, you know, the tin cup at the watering, you know, that like in a, that there's a lot of safety precautions that plastics seem to answer, but it comes with a cost. So, you know, it's just not a, there's not a simple answer to this conundrum, but yeah, just to put it out there as a situation. Next slide. So I just wanted to, the next few slides are just more ways that different elements of the, in the state are sort of addressing the market situation that we're facing. And there are statewide initiatives and there are also local initiatives. So some of the statewide initiatives, there is a notion of extended producer responsibility. This is called EPR in our world. And this is where basically the state sort of says, hey, mattress folks, electronics folks, paint folks, you guys are going to need to figure out a way to take back your materials at the end, sort of like oil and battery, not batteries, but oil, you know, so that the industry that's creating this material has some skin in the game in terms of requiring that those, you know, what to do with them when they're done with their useful life. Because typically what happens is a lot of that just falls on local government, as we're the ones who are creating these franchises with the pickup, with the haulers, and have to manage these materials. And we have a lot of state mandates that say you have to continue to collect this material if it has sort of value in the marketplace or not. You know, we're sort of stuck in the middle. So sometimes having the state step in and say, you know, you have to do something about this. And there's also a plastics pollution prevention initiative that was supposed to be on the 2020 ballot, but because of COVID, they weren't, there's not enough time to collect the signatures. So it's going to get pushed to 2022, but that's an effort to try and improve the recyclability and the sort of plastics prevention and using only materials that actually can be composted. So you're certainly not sending compost overseas. So that's one of the additional benefits of composting, is that that's something that stays local and is managed here in California. So next slide. I wanted to talk about locally what folks are doing to manage, to sort of address the issues of the markets. And one of the things that we're doing on the public side is we have a campaign to really reach out to our residents to have them prepare materials properly so that when they get to the recycling sorting facility, that they are dry and clean and can actually, you know, what can our residents do and our businesses do to help prepare materials as properly as possible. And I also wanted to mention that I noticed that Kimberly Lamb is here on the call with us today, and she is a Republic and helps us, represents them in our service area. So she may be able to help answer some questions if they come up. Some other things that folks are doing locally, some communities are considering going to a dual stream recycling system rather than a single stream. Typically, all the fibers and cans and bottles are all collected together. It's convenient that way, but it also can allow for some more contamination. So if you have, you know, some salad dressing that's left over in your bottle and that ends up getting all over the paper that you're putting in your recycling, that's, you know, all these things start to kind of degrade the value of the material. So some communities have always sort of stuck to this dual stream collection, cans and bottles separate from fibers, and some are considering making a change back to that type of a collection system. Of course, it has all sorts of ramifications in the collection system and the processing system, but it's something that local governments can consider to do. Another thing that local governments are considering is just eliminating harder to handle plastics or just harder to handle materials. RecyleSmart has not chosen to do that at this point because there's a whole education, re-education. Oh yes, we're taking this. No, we're not taking that. You know, it becomes confusing to residents. But some communities are actually eliminating some of the harder to recycle plastics. And then I'm sure you are aware that some communities have actually put bans in place. For example, Walnut Creek has a polystyrene ban. Many communities, certainly coastal communities, have put in plastic straw bans and other types of bans to just reduce the amount of materials that are allowed in the material stream. So lots of different ways to try and manage this market problem. So I just wanted to point all that out, and I think Jen's going to talk about the rules that we as local government are faced with from CalRecycle, our state regulating agency. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to take it over and talk a little bit about the laws that we have to comply with in our operations. So one thing we have to do is, since 2012, make sure that all businesses generating 4 cubic yards of solid waste per week and multifamily properties with 5 or more units are recycling. And we do that with a lot of help from Kimberly and her recycling coordinators to actually go out and touch the businesses and make sure that they're following state law. Next slide, please. There's also AB 1826 that requires organics recycling as well, organics composting for commercial businesses. So currently businesses that generate 4 cubic yards of solid waste or more a week and multifamily properties have to compost their organics. That's going to ratchet down probably this year to 2 cubic yards of solid waste per week. So even more businesses are going to be included in that mandate. Next slide, please. And the big piece of legislation that has already been enacted in 2016 and over the next several years is going to require a ton of work on the part of local governments, haulers, and also generators is SB 1383, organics recovery. So it's also known as the short-lived climate pollutants / organic waste methane emissions reduction legislation. But the idea is that, and Ashley mentioned, a huge portion, up to 40% of our solid waste is organics. And when organics start to decompose in landfills, they generate a lot of methane, which is a really potent greenhouse gas. So the state has established via the statute really ambitious goals for getting that organic material out of our landfills. One of the goals is a 50% reduction in the level of disposal of organic waste from 2014 levels. That's supposed to be by this year, but the regulations aren't even finalized yet, so that's not happening immediately, but that's one of the goals stated in the statute. 75% reduction by 2025, and the statute also includes a whole piece on edible food recovery. So the statute calls for at least 20% of the currently disposed edible food being recovered for human consumption by 2025. The law grants CalRecycle the regulatory authority that is required to hopefully achieve these disposal reduction targets, and they are working on finalizing the regulations for these. They should be done within the next couple of months. We've been waiting for a while. It's been a really big effort on their part. And practically what this means is that organics recycling is going to be mandatory for just about everybody. Residents, businesses, it's going to include food waste, landscape waste, and all those things. Next slide, please. So one of the things that SB 1383 does is imposes a lot of responsibilities on local agencies like ours, cities and joint powers authorities, counties as well. We have to make sure that organics collection services are provided to all of our customers, residential and commercial. We have to help establish edible food recovery programs. We have to conduct education and outreach specifically on organics recycling to our community. There's some requirements for local agencies to procure recyclable and recovered organic products, including compost. We're supposed to make sure that there's enough capacity for our organics to be accepted at processing facilities, and that there's enough capacity for edible food recovery to take place at sufficient levels. And there's a huge piece of monitoring compliance and conducting enforcement that we have to do as well. So there's a really huge lot of responsibilities. On top of that, we also have a lot of reporting requirements. So we're going to have to report on all of our efforts, report on the ordinances that we've adopted to address this, and it's going to be a big effort on our part. Next slide, please. So because of all of the new, well, not new, but the diversion of organics from the landfill to other recycling opportunities, CalRecycle estimates that SB 1383 is going to require between 50 and 100 new or expanded organic waste recycling facilities. So there are about 180 compost facilities in California right now, and there could need to be 100 more in order to accommodate all of these requirements. The tricky thing, another tricky thing about this requirement is that that it's really difficult to site and permit compost facilities because of all the regulations that they have to comply with between the Air Board and the Water Board and local regulations. It's really going to be quite a big challenge, and it's going to take us years to get there. Next slide, please. Okay, I included this image because I saw it at a presentation at a conference last year, and I found it really compelling. This is an image that was used in a Life magazine article from 1955, and the article was entitled "Throwaway Living," and it was all about how great the world of disposables was going to be. The article said, the objects flying through the air would take 40 hours to clean, except that no housewife need bother. They are all meant to be thrown away after use. So, you know, we took this turn at some point, and you saw the chart with the plastics production, which is probably around the time that this was happening. And there are various reasons for that turn. I mean, some people say, I mean, there's a lot of theories about exactly why this happened, but certainly our culture jumped on the bandwagon and said, oh yeah, let's just use things once and throw it away. That's so much easier. But, you know, it's resulted in a lot of unintended consequences. And if you've seen any pictures or data just about how much plastics are in our oceans and our other water bodies, you know that it's actually created a lot of other unintended consequences at the same time. And in some ways, it's made our lives easier. So next slide, please. So we thought we would just include a small discussion about things to keep in mind to kind of counteract the disposable lifestyle culture. We'll certainly reduce, reuse, recycle, and repair. Anything that you can't reuse should be recycled if that's the only thing left to do with it. Make sure you're composting your organics or sending them to compost if you can. And think a little bit about your purchasing choices. So once you start paying attention, you'll see that there are actually a lot of opportunities to forego buying single-use products, to reuse things or repair them. You can choose to buy more durable goods instead of things that are likely to break and have to be thrown away right away. Just, you know, cutting down on disposable things will be a big help as we go forward in this life with the amount of solid waste that we generate. Last year there was an article in National Geographic on plastics, and they had, I just included this because I thought it was such a simple thing that people could easily do, and it was specifically around water bottles and the plastics problem with water bottles. And it's just carry a reusable bottle. You know, they advise choosing aluminum cans over plastic if you have a choice, because aluminum is highly recyclable and also generally fetches a better rate on the commodities market. And then if you do have a plastic drinking bottle, almost all beverage containers that are plastic are recyclable. And so just try to recycle those so they don't, you know, either end up in the landfill or even worse in our water bodies. And next slide, please. Here's just some final thoughts on this. There's no such thing as a way. When we throw away anything, it has to go somewhere. And then there's a nice quotation from Pete Seeger, which I'm not going to read because it's actually a little bit of a tongue twister, and I think we're running a little bit late, but part of it gets to what Judith was talking about earlier with regards to extended producer responsibility, which is that we're hoping that in the future, our manufacturers and producers will take on a greater role in making sure that end of life is handled properly when they're creating products for us. And next slide. Here is our contact emails, so feel free to email us afterwards, and I think we're ready to take questions. Hopefully we'll be able to answer many of them for you.
Thanks, everybody. We did get a couple of questions in, and for the viewing audience, I'll let you know that some questions were posed in advance that had to do with finances, and we will get those answers for you, and I will disseminate them to Contra Costa taxpayers when we get those that information. There was a question about joint powers agreement. Just for clarification, a JPA, joint powers agreement, means it's two or more agencies are sharing costs and services with each other. And with, as Jen had said in the chat, this is a local government agency, as RecycleSmart is. Our member agencies delegated solid waste authority to us, and a new separate local agency was created. So that's where the joint powers come in. There is a question: can bones go in a compost bin?
Yes, yeah, all food, bones, meat, fish, dairy, cheese, anything, cooked foods, food you get from takeout, veggie scraps, yes, all of it.
I have a personal question. Those of us who eat a lot of things like tuna fish, we were supposed to put the cans in the recycle bin with the metals and bottles, but that also attracts cats and things. Is it okay to put that into a plastic bag and knot it so that you don't attract varmints before the recycling? How should that be handled?
Yeah, hopefully now, you know, with our campaign for this empty, clean, and dry, maybe you won't have the varmint smell, you know, pest issue, maybe much longer. But yes, you can use a bag, either clear or bagless is what we like in recycling, because the recycling goes over a sorting processing line. These are actual people who are sorting these materials at first before they go into all the magnets and screens. So as long as they can see what's in a bag, you know, that would be helpful. So no black bags, no white bags in recycling. It's just, it takes too long and they can't see what's in it.
Did you mean the can is in a small bag?
Yeah, after the tuna or sardines or whatever comes out, then putting the empty cans into something so that it couldn't be smelled from the outside.
Clear should be okay.
Clear.
Right.
Sounds good. Val asks, is there a movement to ban plastic water bottles that you know of?
Not yet. Judith, have you, Jen?
I mean, I would say more that, you know, different, like, for example, the city of San Francisco has banned plastic water bottles. They won't buy them, like, as a city. They will not, like, you cannot purchase them for city events or whatever. There are no plastic water bottles allowed at San Francisco International Airport. Not that any of us are going anywhere, but that, you know, so I think, you know, local governments do have the control to do that. Statewide, I doubt that would get very far, but sometimes some things, you know, like even the individual plastic bags from supermarkets, that started off with individual local governments, you know, restricting that bag bans, and then eventually it became a statewide thing. So that's, I guess it's possible.
Okay. And on the same note, are twist top caps to water bottles recyclable?
Yeah, our franchise agreement allows all caps on all containers. It's specifically written into our agreement. There used to be kind of this perception that you should take them off first. Now it's actually kind of the reverse. I think the tighter, the better you can get it on the container, the better, because then they won't kind of fall through the system. And there are screens and different ways, and it's called a water bath and different things with plastics to where they separate those different materials. But yes, caps, and they're all allowed on our materials.
Okay, would that be the same for metal caps to glass jars?
Yeah, in our service area, that's okay. We do allow all caps and lids. Yeah. It's a little, again, everyone here probably lives in a different city, so it comes back to that local thing. I would check in with your city. If you maybe live in Concord, you have Concord Disposal, so it's a different company. So always check first, but in our service area, yes.
Okay, and Lorraine asks, when do you see can and bottle recycling centers reopening? Good luck with that one.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, already there has been sort of a crisis of recycling centers but separately because of COVID, there has been sort of a halting of the requirement for supermarkets that were taking them to take them because of the handling. So I really don't know. I think I hope soon.
It was, so about, 2 or 3 years ago though, about 300 different CRV centers closed across the state. And that's something that the state of California managed. So if you go to the Cal Recycle website, if you just Google Cal Recycle CRV, you'll come up with their whole website. And basically the budget that they use to fund those different take-back centers dried up. So about 300 of them again closed about 3 years ago. At their monthly public meetings, I think it's always a discussion item, and they're trying to figure out the whole budget around funding those. But right now, I don't see any new, or I think the only ones that would open up are those grocery stores and whatnot.
Okay. I have one or two last, let's see, a clarification, Ray, CNG.
Oh, compressed natural gas.
Can I speak to that? My name is Patsy Ronat, worked for an oil company. CNG, compressed natural gas, is the gaseous product of petroleum. It's the first product separated during the distillation process. It's tasteless, odorless, non-toxic, and it is a petroleum product. And so for your credibility, when you're speaking and you say CNG is not a petroleum product, you might lose some of your audience in the future. So it's a, great thing, but it is a petroleum product, period. It's a fossil fuel. That's what it is. And it's okay. But when you say we're not using petroleum products because we're using CNG, it's just not correct.
Okay, Kimberly, maybe you can clarify. I'm not sure. I thought we were. Where does the CNG come from? Is it from the ground at you plug them all in there? We thought maybe it came from the landfill. It comes from the
ground with the petroleum. And when they take it out, it's the first thing that's removed that comes off, during the distillation process. I think at one time many years ago, it may have just been like a waste, or maybe it was just burned off, because it wasn't used. But now it's part of the extraction of petroleum. And it is a petroleum product. I mean, it just is. I looked it up before I made this statement because I wanted to be sure that I was right.
I know. I thought we did too. Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's a good question. Thanks, Pat.
Yeah. Nancy Pelosi, I remember one time made the statement, we are going to be done with fossil fuels. Everybody's going to have natural gas. And at the time, that was, people said, oh, that's not quite right. But then I think we all kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'll give you one last question because I know you all have the business to get back to. But one comment that we did get in from Tom Garino, who mentioned, Ashley, he thinks your name is very cool.
Thank you. Thanks.
It is
Can't
pretty.
forget it. If you have any questions, can't forget it in the future.
That's right. The last question I wanted to pose, and it's not so much a question as a discussion item. We've been told by many sources that a plastic bag takes like 1,000 years to recycle, to which one response is, show me a 1,000-year-old plastic bag. My personal response from living part-time in Arizona is, obviously those people have never seen a plastic bag in the Arizona's desert after being outside for a week. They disintegrate. And my philosophy on plastic bags, since especially right now we're not to be using our own bags unless we want to schlep our own groceries into them, is if you live by water, a paper bag will disintegrate in water. And you can use it before it gets into water. So those of us who live near waterways, to me, plastic should be avoided, but the paper bags are a better alternative. Whereas if you're living in an arid climate like the desert, the paper is just going to sit there forever. You're better off with plastic that will disintegrate. So what is the thinking on those lines?
Does plastic, I mean, Judith, does it ever really, I mean, we think maybe visually it disintegrates, but I think it just breaks down into smaller and smaller little pieces and pieces that we can't see visually, you know, with the naked eye. Jen, Judith, you want
Well,
to?
I mean, I think what we think, oh, sorry, Ashley.
No, go ahead.
I think like we want to move away from anything single use. So plastic or paper or anything. I don't think we have like a position on whether plastic or paper single use is better or worse, but we do have a problem with microplastics in our environment now. So these are really tiny pieces of plastic that get, and apparently I heard this at a plastics recycling conference this year, that some plants can even take up microplastics somehow, which I never thought was possible before. But you know, they're in our waterways. Fish and tiny little things eat these little pieces of plastic thinking that they're food, and then they're not, and it gets into our food chain. So microplastics are a problem, but I think our conclusion would just be try to avoid single-use anything if you can.
Okay. Two last questions just came in. One of them was, what is your pension liability for Smart Recycle or RecyleSmart, excuse me, and where does CRV money go? Like on the start bottles, we pay a CRV, but we can't take those bottles in for money back. So who's getting that, and who gets other money for CRV?
Well, I'll touch on the CRV, and then I know Jen looked into the pension. So CRV, again, that's managed by the state of California. So we are paying that fee on all of our bottles and cans, and you are supposed to be able to redeem it in convenience zones. They have them all laid out through the state of California. But like we said earlier, they have closed. And I think if you have any questions about how to get that money back right now, it would just be good to reach out to Cal Recycle or look at their website. Because yeah, they are charging you that, and you should have the right to redeem it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jen?
I did ask our finance director about our retirees and pension liability, and she said we have one retiree and our net pension liability is $467,474 currently.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Okay, I think we're out of time now. I want to thank all three of you, Judith, Jen, Ashley. Thank you for spending your lunch hours with us. We do appreciate it. Yeah, a little applause from everybody here. And if there is any other questions, people know where to reach you. We're very appreciative. I'll remind the audience that on Friday, Candace Anderson is speaking with us at the COCO tax meeting. And next Friday, we'll be hearing from Michael McGill, who will be talking about the farm, as we call it. And he will also be talking about pollutants in our waterways, and a lot more. So check www.cocotax.org to register and see more details. And until then, thank you all for tuning in. Be safe, be healthy, and be well informed. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.